One of the most important topics of our discussion, evolution of the media, the rise of the blogger threat or progress. I would like to invite our speakers to the stage. Mr. Arlem Desir, OSCE representative on freedom of the media. Madam Noreen Jamil, head of foreign operation for Vice News Tonight on HBO. Alexei Osipov, resident correspondent of the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper in the United States. Madam Raham Khan, journalist, writer, social activist, and producer. Zavri Rozmat, the founder of the Step Portal. Big Sultan Kizibek, blogger, leader of the Jockey System. I do not give the countries for our guests because, in my point of view, in the modern blogosphere, the country and the territorial origin loses its meaning. As it used to be in journalism, it used to be meaningful, but now it's not meaningful anymore. Darigana Sultanova set the topic in her opening remarks. She said a very interesting issue. Development of communication, technologies and devices goes ahead of our imagination and our ideas of how we might communicate with each other. It appears to us that this is the final word, probably a work of art for now. However, what is going to happen in the future? There are people who are thinking how we might have a correlation between the personal freedom of expression and responsibility to the society, or the identity or representation done by the personalities for their countries of origin, for instance. There is a new genre of journalism based on the assets that go beyond the borders of the countries and beyond the borders of the institutions, and to what extent and how the states or the conventional institutions of journalism are supposed to be interacting with this sphere, which is advancing at a very high pace. The market, the YouTube market, goes beyond any imagination. In Russia, YouTube is ahead of traditional television if we look at some of the parameters. Moreover, it attracts totally different audiences. TV is viewed by those people who come in the evening at home, who have a traditional life. For instance, they have their dinner at 6 p.m. and they turn on their TV, or they turn it on right away once they're back. However, the blogosphere, blogging, is about people who are on the communicative networks on the internet, and those people don't watch TV. I will confess that I have not been watching TV at home for 6 or 7 years already. I have a TV set, but it's not connected to any of the news channels, any of the news networks. I can't remember even when I would use my control to change the channels and to watch that multiple hours of linear broadcasting. When you have a tablet or a mobile phone, you can always get connected and see what you want to see. So, could we consider that the professional journalism is endangered? Can we say that it's an endangered species? Is there any future for public information? And does it belong to anyone with talent for communication? Will bloggers and social media dominate public opinion? How are the professional media and governments responding to that? That's what we're going to be discussing. And the first question will go to Mr. Arlem Desir, the OSCE representative on freedom of the media. Mr. Desir, do you believe that blogging, the blogosphere, where we have tens and probably hundreds of millions of people as constant users and information consumers as the media. And what do you think is the difference between the traditional journalism and the new types of journalism, the journalism of personal expression?
Thank you, Maxime. Good morning, everybody. Yes, obviously, there is differences between professional journalists and bloggers, but I'm not sure about the definition of the differences. And as you said, we have seen in the past years the emergence of a new category of actors of the sphere of information, the bloggers. Potentially, every citizen now with a smartphone is a press agency, can provide information to the world about events that he's just seeing, that he can record on his telephone, and he can disseminate this information. But there is a difference with professional journalism, which refer to an history, to code of ethics, to professional standards, to the idea that you must check the information before publishing it. It doesn't mean that bloggers doesn't have their own code of ethics. A lot of bloggers have decided on their own to, as a matter of fact, try to provide the same quality of information than journalists. And as we are in a kind of new age of internet, perhaps the second age, a kind of teenage of internet, where everybody is afraid about the dysfunctioning of this new age. Hatred, fake news, a lot of bad aspects of the humankind which are just seen on internet, because everybody can attack everybody, can disseminate any kind of false information. I would like also to remind us about the acquis, about the achievement of this opening of the information sphere, and the fact that we have seen a lot of new media arising with bloggers, which have created a space for creativity, for critical thinking, for new voices, which did not exist with the traditional press. It was very difficult to create a TV. It's very expensive. It's very difficult to create a printed newspaper. It's easier, of course, to create an online blog and an online media. In the totality, there is a lot of very bad things, but there is also a lot of very interesting and positive creation. So I think that we have to work on the fact that the institutions, the states, the regulatory body must be very attentive while there is all this discussion about regulation of content, regulation of hate speech, regulation of avoiding dissemination of, for example, terrorist propaganda, that there is not too much restriction, that we preserve freedom of expression, freedom of the media, freedom of the creativity of the blogging, which is a very important contribution to the information sphere. And that was also a discussion we had yesterday. I think that the good answer regarding the bad aspect is more about media literacy, critical thinking, about helping people to make distinction between what could be false information, fake news, and what are real information. And I think the answer is not in restricting bloggers compared to professional journalism, even if I would like the bloggers, when they become professional, to refer to the classical code of ethics of journalism.
That's a very interesting position. I would say that you've been very firm about identifying that distinction. As far as I understand, you believe that bloggers are not professional enough, but many bloggers have millions of subscribers. Those whom you say are not sufficiently professional have audiences that surpasses the audiences of professional media, and cannot. Do you think that the professional media do not produce fake news? Those might be corrected sometimes by the independent bloggers.
Yes, I think you're right to correct me if I was bad understood. I don't think that bloggers are not professional, because you're right, a lot of bloggers have become very professional because of the number of viewers, but because also of the creativity, of the technicalities that they have developed. What I mean is that they don't refer to the classical professional standard of journalists. But it doesn't mean that they could not refer to ethical standards. And for example, in many countries there is press councils or media councils, ombudsman of the press, code of ethics of the journalists. And I think that there should be a dialogue between professional classical journalists and bloggers, so that even if there is differences, all of them could refer to the same kind of code of ethics when it's about the quality of information.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Now we would like Madam Noreen Jamil to develop on this subject. I believe that there is some sort of an apprehension and lack of trust on the part of the professional media when it comes to bloggers, as if you would think that we are bloggers. I used to be a professional journalist and now I'm a blogger, and in 3 months my blog generated 172,000 subscribers. It's more than some of the newspapers get. And for some reason, I've heard now I'm considered to be unprofessional, non-professional, because I'm not a part of the system. Do we need to be a part of the system in order to this respected and recognized system to be considered as a journalist? Or our perception needs to change, our approaches to what information is should change? Maybe the state, the governments are losing their rights to be the only credible source of information, and credibility becomes open to any individual capable of supporting the principle of credibility.
I think you're right. I think bloggers have grown in stature over the years, over the recent years, but there's a difference between blogging and opinion and journalism. I think there is a distinction that we can make there. And it's not just opinions that we want to hear. So in terms of accessing the public, information is now free, but quality of information is expensive. And if you're a journalist working within a broadcast corporation, every journalist that you send out, every story that you do is expensive, and there is an authentication process, a verification process, a contextualization of everything that we do. And bloggers, they can give their opinion. Now, I think that we can work hand in hand, and with my company, I work at Vice, which is a very new and innovative company, and I work a lot with bloggers all over the world, because in some of the countries that I want to access information from, there is no traditional media, and if there is traditional media, it's government-based. So if I go to Uganda, for example, I will turn to a blogger to get my sources of information, and so that as a journalist, I can then work with the blogger to put out a story. Where that starts to fall down, and especially in East Africa and some of the other countries, for example in Indonesia, is that the government recognizes the power of bloggers and is now starting to crack down. There are new laws being implemented in Indonesia. In Uganda, for example, if you want to access Facebook and Twitter or WhatsApp, from next month you have to pay a daily fee, and a lot of people can't afford that. And so you're almost stopping the narrative of a country by introducing a tax on information. The same thing is happening in Kenya. It's now, the government just passed a law banning fake news, but who arbitrates what fake news is? It's the government. So for me, blogging is a very important alternative voice. It doesn't mean that as a journalist I would take everything that they say at face value. I need to verify it, I need to authenticate it, and then I need to contextualize it, and it just adds to the scene of of our information that we have available to us these days.
What about the official journalism? We cannot use it, the same approach. I wouldn't trust everything that the official journalism reports on. And I do not trust everything that the official newspapers are writing or the official TV is broadcasting. I turn to this independent blogging sphere. And then It looks like we're talking as if we were as if the institutionalized media were the equivalent of truth and professionalism. However, pretty often what we see is that people turn away from the official media because they stop trusting them. Isn't that true?
That's also true. But with the same vein, bloggers are not always trustworthy either. Everybody has their own agenda. And so it's up to the individual consumer to decide what's right, what's wrong for them. And for example, in the US, where I was working for the last 5 years, we've seen a growth in fake news being, or what is termed as fake news, being accepted, but it's been accepted as truth by the people who support Trump. So this echo chamber that we've been talking about over the last few days is very true. And so when you look at your Twitter feed, you're looking at people that you want to hear from, and they're reinforcing your own ideas, and you don't want to hear from people who have got a different narrative to what you're saying. So people like Alex Jones and Fox News are going up in terms of audiences, and on the counter side, the left media is also going up because we have a shift in the balance of power. So I think both are true. I think journalism can be manipulated, and bloggers too. And bloggers are on their own, and so each individual opinion is taken as such.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Alexei Osipov, I would like to follow up on what Madam Jamil said. She talked about the United States, and you work in the United States as well. The president of the US called some of the respectable, well-known media affiliated with the Democratic Party as the fake media. My memory serves me right, he did it publicly. He said that Huntington and CNN, I believe, he said, you are the fake media. So maybe it's about the personal assessment. Maybe the criteria of professionalism have shifted. Sure, Maxim, but I would like to make a small remark on your blog, because within the last several weeks or months, you've had a great high rating program at the radio Komsomolskaya Pravda. Well, you cannot do without advertisement. Yeah, because I agree that certain part from the subscribers were obtained by you thanks to the fact that you are present on a traditional media outlet. Okay, let's say thank you to Channel 1, who showed my face to the whole country. Yeah, sure, but we supported that. And I'm not going to develop or to support the topic of the previous speaker, because I would like to somehow oppose that. We, the traditional media, provoked this fear of new journalism, and we've been playing and jungling with terms why the blogging is called new journalism or new journalism environment. I would totally disagree with this because of one simple reason. If you at home are able to do the bandages and you know the medications, you know what medication is good for what, or you can do some sorts of infusions, can't you be called a doctor? Well, you cannot, because there are some objective and subjective reasons. However, all of those manipulations and millions of views of various channels and the number of subscribers, friends, I would say this is a well-known, those are well-known numbers, and at the same time I believe that the price levels have in fact changed as well. I think that if every single citizen of the earth would give $1, then hunger in Africa would have been eradicated. However, the appeal towards seeing something going viral, like some Twitter account or a Facebook account getting millions of subscribers, reminds me of one comparatively old fairy tale, that making $1 million in the Silicon Valley with IT technologies you can do without any higher education degree. That's how the first capitals were made by Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and who turned later into worldwide leaders. However, we cannot go any further beyond those two examples. In my point of view, it's my firm belief that blogging, well, certainly with some small exceptions, because you always have exceptions, cannot be considered to be a new type of journalism. This is not new journalism. Try to get an interview from one of the CEOs of a large corporation or government for a blogger. You will not be able to do that. You need to have some certain background, the code of ethics, which is certainly enshrined somewhere at the governmental level, at the level of the unions of journalists. Sometimes it's not even written, but it's complied with. I'm not sure that blogging or the things that many of us, or many of you, because I'm not ready to sign up for that, call the new journalism. Blogging journalism has a right to some successful existence. I would not say that it might replace the traditional journalism.
And Alexei, still, I would request that you answer my question regarding the particular situation in US. President Trump, let me reiterate the question, named several respectable, recognized media outlets of US fake media. Did that make them fake media? If the president calls them that, well, he's not a boss for them, for media. And remember, where he expressed that personal opinion of his in his own personal Twitter account. Now, did he get more subscribers after that, or did it go down? Or did the number of viewing audience of those channels go down? No. It's just opinions. And one of the other panelists, to the panelists, I'd like to remind yet another example. I'm all taking it to the commercial side because it's, remember the recent scandal at United when a passenger was traumatized, was pulled out of the aircraft. That led to a tide of criticism that certain codes were violated, human rights were violated, and thousands of subscribers of different accounts, millions, said they shall never fly United anymore. Now what happened? For a few days, the stock of United plummeted, but then it showed record quarterly income. Don't forget about monopolies. Monopoly of President Trump is not questioned by anyone. We're still going around and round. Wouldn't you agree, everyone? For it's a very delicate theme. Darigana Sultana, you said a very delicate theme in your introduction, so let's try and make further steps. Madam Han, you are handling a tragic, hard theme, protection of rights of children, human rights in areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan where there's constant warfare, where human rights are violated every day. Tell me, is official media always ready to support that sincere coverage, that tragic vision of the situation, things that you get to see with your own eyes, and things the likes you told me yesterday when we talked personally about child slave trade and many other areas? Blogosphere, in many ways, is a media that is independent of politicians, of corporates. Can they play a significant role in protection of human rights? What's your take on this?
Thank you, Maxime. Before I introduce what I do now, one of the things that I've heard, I want to sort of develop that, particularly what Alexei said. I've been working in Pakistan for 5 years. I live and used to be a journalist. I used to be a mainstream journalist and have worked for the likes of the BBC in England and for mainstream news channels tackling current affairs and political issues in Pakistan on prime time. And about 4 years ago, we had, of course, in Pakistan, we have a huge problem with militancy and militant operations against militancy. And I decided to leave my journalism to pursue social causes and pursue advocacy. And somehow that's led me into the blogosphere. And to answer Alexei's question, why I gave my background is because I found when I was working on mainstream channels and news that there is always policy, an angle, and an editorial standard that you follow. And it might be that someone young or young to media might have a very good idea, but does not fit into the policy guidelines of the institution that you work for. And so the fact also, when Alexia said that if you have a problem, you would not use only band-aids or bandages at home, you would go to a professional doctor. That is assuming that journalism or journalists come from an organized institution always, which is not true in my experience. Some of the very sensitive news of the day, or the first news of the day, is handled by people who come from diverse backgrounds. For example, one of our very competent producers on radio news of the day for this is the 6 o'clock news and breakfast news, was a chemistry graduate. So we come from all sorts of backgrounds. I think it's important for people to understand that journalists do not all have journalism degrees, and some people with journalism degrees do not go very far in journalism and the media industry. Coming back to why I left it is because I belong to the northwest frontier, as the British used to call us, of Pakistan, and this is the Afghan-Pakistan border. Not only because of the language of the region, but also because of poor representation in terms of vote. We feel as Pashtuns that we don't have a voice on mainstream channels, that issues which affect us are not picked up as the issues that sell on mainstream. So we are not metropolitan city of Karachi, we're not London, and we don't constitute a large a quantity of the vote. So this is very important, that I found that a lot of people who were good journalists or even budding journalists would not get a voice on mainstream media because their issues were not considered commercially viable to give ratings. And I have found in the last 3 years that supporting those journalists, because what is journalism? Journalism is reporting on things which are happening around you. And it will always be subjective. If we go back to the history of journalism, it was actually a subjective origin. So it's very important for them to have a voice. And in fact, as Noreen said, that in some countries, like Pakistan, for example, most of the news used to be state-controlled, and now we have what is referred to as inverted totalitarianism, where you do not have a fascist leader saying that you will not publish it, but they're media houses who are complicit with governments or with the military or with lobbies who pursue certain agendas and ignore others. For example, one of the myths that is perpetuated about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or the Pashtuns in Pakistan is that we do not want to educate our girls. And I feel that this is a myth that only a blogger can dispel, because I can, as a blogger, journalist turned blogger, report to you that actually there are not that many schools, and it's actually nothing to do with the fact that children do not want to be in school or parents do not want their children to be in school, but children have no schools within the vicinity, within a safe distance for girls to pursue education. So you have a different angle. So I think it's changing, and as humans we are always resistant to change. So for example, when I started at the BBC, we were recruited in as journalists to change the weather story, because the men in suits were using a lot of meteorological jargon, and our audiences told us that they wanted more weather, but they wanted weather in a more friendly way, which they could understand. So I think we're always resistant to change. Blogger and blogosphere is perhaps, as Mr. Desir said, is in its teenage. So I think we need more regulations perhaps, but a lot of bloggers do use self-censorship now, and they realize as they have a growing following that they need to check their facts. What I do as an individual, I encourage younger bloggers to use the rules that journalism should have followed, or what we are taught in universities, that we are supposed to have facts, accuracy over speed. So we have a lot of good bloggers coming in who do check their facts, who are quite I suppose, try to be unbiased, and I think it's always going to be very difficult to be completely objective when it comes to reporting or when it comes to blogging or journalism of any kind. But to say that it is not journalism, I think is incorrect, because journalism is telling a story. And if people want to watch your story, And if institutions like, for example, the BBC want to have a running order where they start with a crime, but if a mouse that is baked into a loaf of bread gets 1 million hits, the BBC also has to rethink its running orders. What do the consumers want to watch? And what is relevant to their lives is what constitutes journalism. And I think that we will have to be led by what people want to see. And the more people, obviously we have a lot of bloggers now, and if you look at the number of blogs per minute per day, you can't count them. So the growth it's very difficult to contain it now. I would suggest that we need regulatory bodies, and we need regulatory bodies for even news, for mainstream journalism in many countries. For example, in Pakistan, for example, in Uganda, and other countries where we do not have an independent regulatory body for even mainstream media. So we need an independent regulatory body even for the blogosphere, where there's a lot of cyberbullying and there's lots of agenda pushing as well, similar to mainstream media.
I'd like to clarify one point. You used the word fascism, if I got it right. Or new totalitarianism, is that what you called it? New totalitarianism?
In the old days, we used to have like certain states, and I don't want to be going into sort of present day as well. We have states where, Noreen gave you the example where there's a tax now on Twitter and Facebook. We know that there are many countries where you do not have Twitter, or they have their own version of Twitter. It's interesting because when in a situation of a coup, they actually go back to the same technology. So it's sort of, they also go back to an alternative media to rescue themselves. But inverted totalitarianism is actually where one leader or one political party or one ruler doesn't talk or give out rules that you will not publish this. For example, at the moment, a lot of the mainstream media may not be aware that in Pakistan, for the first time in many years, we have mainstream news blackout. So we have the longest, the first English daily has been suffering from a blackout in areas because of it, because they've been stopped, their circulation has been stopped. Inverted totalitarianism is a concept where you have media houses who direct the line of the news and the agenda of the news, and so they are directing who comes into power, what their policies are, and they're setting the agenda. And so for a very long time, we have seen that in the US, and I think that needs to be addressed also. So it's a fascism of a different kind. It's more covert, and it needs to be, I suppose, looked into, because a lot of consumers, whatever comes on TV, they would believe that. And now we have the same with bloggers as well. So we need to make people understand that everything that you read, everything that you see, whether it's on mainstream TV or whether it's on the new journalism media, may not be completely objective.
Corporate media dictatorship, maybe that's a term I can suggest here. Now addressing Zero Razmat, founder of Die Steppe, as I saw it. So it's German. So it's the word steppe. So she's a compatriot of many people here in this audience. She's a Kazakh journalist or a blogger. And firstly, if you could please tell us about your project with such an original and interesting name. And secondly, I would request that you develop this theme of this corporate dictatorship. In fact, are you trying to become an official media, or are you happy with the current status that you have? And do you get any investment from outside that will make you a part of a corporation? Or is your status more convenient for you as an independent blogger or independent journalist? I'd like to correct you and thank you for your question. I'm not a journalist, I'm not a blogger, I'm a media manager. Yes. And we have journalists in our team, and we also work with bloggers as well. In our project, we generally write about young people, and the content, the way we present it, it has to be fun. That's why, many traditional media fight bloggers because bloggers are more fun, they know how to present, and conventional media very often have hard time catching up. And there's also a problem with attention span. You know, a blogger grabs attention and the media try to follow the suit and start using screaming headlines. But in fact, they're not informative, their pieces. So me, as an investor of this project, I'm happy with the situation right now that we didn't raise any investment. We are independent. And I would say that today in Kazakhstan, we are managing to write about things, and no one sets the agenda for us. No one sets a policy for us. No one tells us what to write and what not to write. And we're free in that sense. Now, about ads. Why media fights bloggers? I think it's useless. Bloggers have influence and it will only grow. And I agree with the previous speakers. There has to be critical thinking. Every blogger should understand that they bear responsibility for what they say. And very often, most often, in our industry, bloggers are very biased and speak only of their opinion. But the goal of a journalist is to aspire to be objective. So, opinion of Rupert Murdoch, for instance. So, objective opinion of Rupert Murdoch, head of that corporation. Now, objective, well, at least try to be unbiased. That's a goal for journalists. And I should also speak about advertising. Some speakers spoke of that before me. 80% of budget of advertising is now dedicated to bloggers. They set aside for bloggers. And when we don't get an investment, we make our money on ads. It's hard for us. Because when a company comes, okay, out of 100% of the budget, 80% is for bloggers, and only 20% now go to conventional media. So we, as a young media, are happy that we come up with alternative projects with some cool formats and video and everything. It's distributed media content, and it's a kind of content that will be fun at any social platform, YouTube and all the others. So let me say, if it's just one piece of news, we understand that it may end up being boring as an article, then it's presented as video. If it's a video, then we decide what kind of platform. So that's how we work. It's quite clear that the conventional media perhaps are angry with bloggers because of two factors. Most often it's biased, and second is budgets of advertising budget. So it's the market. It's very simple in my mind. I would like to address Beksultan Kazabek, author of video Zin that got over 20 million YouTube views. Good day, everyone. I guess I'm a minority here. I am a blogger. I'm a blogger too. So, okay, there are two of us, and I think Rakan is also a blogger. So, a few words about our project. We're a young Kazakh media project. We're just 3 years old. We have 1 million Instagram subscribers and around 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I agree with the opinions expressed here in the panel, but there are a couple of instances where I would like to get a better understanding. Whether we call bloggers journalists or not, people will consume information. And I very much like the comparison with the children's cough syrup. If you give cough syrup and tell the child it's medicine, it's unlikely that the child will like it. But if you add some flavor to it, the child will take medicine. And the same is true with information. My generation is more interested to see information in new formats, possibly with some humor there. And for others, that flavor that you add to that cough syrup could be our independence and the fact that you're not a major publishing house. For instance, a good example is Yuriy Vdut, who gets millions of views on YouTube. He interviewed Chichvarkin, interviewed Khodorkovsky, interviewed Zhirinovsky. and I would disagree with Mr. Osipov that not that for bloggers or YouTubers it's hard to get interview with politicians, but Yuri Dud is a bright example that a YouTuber can make great interviews. They can do new formats, whether it's a documentary or any other convergent media format. So in that sense, for bloggers, it's much easier with the audience. Audience always takes into account. Even the fact that I was invited here speaks of that. And we discuss journalism. It depends on the audience. If the blogger has several million big audience, people will listen to him because the blogger has, we'll call it a fan base, but it's a source of information. I also would agree that bloggers, in our team, we understand that we have a share of social responsibility. We understand it very clearly. We call ourselves halal bloggers. We try not to speak of alcohol. Well, we base ourselves on our moral values. We do all of that. But the very fact that the new generation, they don't watch TV. I don't remember when was the last time I watched TV. Young generation is on tube. And information has to be presented maybe with that flavor, with the new format. We have videos on social responsibility, for instance, anti-smoking campaign with millions of views. Will you show that video, that zin zin, so that there's at least one more click? I'd like to warn you that you'll be somewhat shocked. But is zin zin halal? Tell us. It's hard to explain. But please take it as a fact that such formats really get going. Maybe we make fun of this format behavior of young males who are not very cultured, saying that we don't want our brothers, our brethren to act like you could see in this. It's a music video, please. Hey bro, we need a track. It should get really going. Let's do this. I think that's enough. So, things like that. That was great. Although I don't understand Kazakh, but I think everyone who doesn't understand Kazakh understood what this was all about. So it's against those who act like gangsters or gangster wannabes. We spent 4 hours for this video, and the speed of production is very important. Young generation, a bright example. There was a storm in Astana the day before yesterday. I didn't turn on my TV, because on TV I'll see it at 8 o'clock news. I wanted to see it right now. And those are already a million videos. Yeah, I'll go to a public board, there are memes and jokes, and there will be those videos how a roof is being blown away. And I always follow it like that. And everybody does it in my generation like that. Speed is important. Okay, thank you very much, Big Sultan. Now, we went through the first round of questions in great detail, and I would request now that our speakers would answer quite briefly. Very quickly. So, Mr. Desir, maybe starting with you, let me ask you this. This quick response, this rapid response, which unlike major conventional media, blogosphere, Israel, I just was shooting it and I can upload it to YouTube that very instant. Is that a signal for major respectable media, mainstream media, supporting that as a scream of an individual? Hey, there's a problem. But as Imam Han was saying, major media can respond to that saying, you know, it's a problem that is no fun, that is not of interest for our audience. Let's say children's right or violence against women or slave trade or things of that kind. How? That scream for help that today is becoming also a technological message to the society, to the public. Can it be picked up by respectable media? And are the roads of the official media, and I'll again refer to Imam Han, who said, who are most likely being led by corporate principles and the demand of the society on behalf of which the blogosphere works, unprofessional. So what's the difference there?
I think that it's inevitable now for professional and traditional media and journalists to take into account the competition with bloggers. There was this example about a storm in Astana. And there is an event, and very quickly bloggers are putting online the videos, photos, information, and the traditional media cannot act as it doesn't exist, because they know that the traditional viewers will have also access by their phones on internet to this kind of information. So the problem is, as the competition between bloggers and professional journalists to be on the speed, or as it to be on another dimension. And I think that it's not possible for professional journalists to compete on the speed with the blogger, while they have to compete on the quality, on verifying the information, on giving the context, on explaining what exactly happens. And it means that you have to understand that it can take some more time. So probably in the future, the young generation will not look as much on traditional TV than my generation has been doing. But even the traditional professional journalists will create online media. I mean, TV has also online edition. Printed traditional press have developed their online edition. And I think that the viewers, the citizen, will need to be able to go to this traditional media to check the kind of information that probably first they have received through bloggers. And I must also recognize that some traditional journalists, even if they are supposed to refer to professional standards and code of ethics, does not really does it. You also mentioned this. And that some bloggers are coming from the traditional press, and that even if they have become bloggers with all the new capabilities that it gives to them, they have not the same constraint, perhaps, that in their previous media, but they still refer to a certain ethics regarding the quality of the information that they provide. As a matter of fact, I don't think there will be one definition of bloggers. Anybody can be a blogger, but some bloggers will try to develop a kind of quality, a kind of professional standards regarding the quality of the information that they will disseminate. So I think that the competition at the end has to be more on quality than on speed.
Госпожа Джамиль,
Madam Jamil, when will the word traditional finally be applied to blogging? Because this is always like some sort of a thing that we hear. This is traditional, this is not traditional. I worked as a host for Channel 1, worked with traditional media. I left realizing that this is not the agenda that I established. It appeared to me that the conversation, discussion of the modern issues is not within the framework of the traditional media. Maybe the tradition is shifting towards that individual journalism, individualized presentation of your ethical view of the world.
Excuse me,
no,
was it?
it's to Miss Jamil.
Okay.
I think you raise a very interesting point. What is traditional, what's not? I think that is something I can't answer. I think that's going to happen down the road. When I started in journalism 20 years ago, I used to carry big equipment around to try and deliver my message. And it was very expensive, and I had to work within a big corporation to be able to do it. I didn't, as an individual, wasn't able to reach an audience. So I reached my audience through a company. I worked for a wire service. Now, as an individual blogger, you can access the internet like this, but that doesn't mean that there is no room for traditional journalism. I think you almost are arguing the point that we should not have traditional journalism anymore. I think there is a need for it. I worked a lot in Syria last year, and I worked with
Нет,
people
возможно, нам с вами не нужно.
Maybe you and me don't need it, but someone needs it.
Sorry.
Traditional. Maybe you and me, we don't need traditional journalism, but someone needs it. But who needs it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, the nightly news audience is aging. They're, on average now, the statistics show they're about 60 years plus. I work for a young company, and we've incorporated blogging into what we do, and it's considered traditional because we are on a network news channel every night. We have a nightly show. But it's not traditional if you watch it. It could be on any digital platform that you watch online or on your phone. But there is a definite difference here between blogging and opinions and getting news sources from people who are considered activists or have become citizen journalism. For example, I was trying to give the example from Syria. I can't go to Syria. It's too dangerous. My company won't let me. The insurance people who control all the insurance wouldn't let journalists go. But I can pick up the phone and I can call my contact in Aleppo and get a story out almost on a weekly basis, and that informs the public on the traditional sites. So it's a marriage between traditional and non-traditional. And I think those lines are getting blurred. And I just wanted to pick up on a point that Alexei said, that bloggers are not allowed to, interview politicians. And the Philippines has just introduced a new law that bloggers, if they have a certain amount of followers, can apply for accreditation. So some governments are recognizing bloggers, others are trying to clamp down on them, and it's the same with journalism, I think, throughout the world and over the last 15, 20 years.
Как раз
I'm just thinking maybe I should go to Syria during this soccer cup in football cup in Moscow. It's much better to have a Syrian visa and go there, because I've traveled to Syria before, during the war, on my own initiative, not the way I used to go to Chechnya or Yugoslavia as a correspondent of a news outlet. But I think this woe, this suffering that we are all seeing, force all of us, everyone who sees this, to discuss this on different sides of the front. But the sufferings of the Syrian people are so monstrous, and we cannot embrace that. Just like the sufferings of the Afghan people, who has gone through 40 years of war, civil war. And that forces us to keep going back to that story, to keep discussing that issue. Alexei, how do you address this? I know that Komsomolskaya Pravda has a couple of guys working in the hottest areas. Yes, indeed, some of the countries started recognizing bloggers when it comes to accreditation. A similar practice is applied in Israel and in the administration of the Palestinian autonomy. And I ran into that, and it's not that I welcome or approve this decision of the specific governments and specific authorities, but I intentionally took my phone into my hands to be able to not to forget about the main points that I wanted to outline. First of all, regarding the storm in Astana, bloggers presented as their own victory on speed. I received this information, in fact, simultaneously from the bloggers, but those were like separate pictures, and the traditional media provided a full picture a couple of hours later. What kind of buildings were damaged, how many benches were flown away, were taken away with the wind, and what was the area affected by this natural disaster and how long it lasted. Even with 2,000 of photographs from the bloggers in Astana and from different sources, I couldn't understand the full picture of what happened. So what's the value of it? The speed, when it's fast, 1 second faster, or 1 minute faster, in terms of the speed of presentation. Someone said that bloggers come first, but who are those people? Why yesterday, going live, my colleagues and Kazakhstani hosts would be interviewed. So live air of a traditional medium outlet is behind the bloggers. To be honest, for my own sake, for the sake of my vanity, I look at the statistics of references and quotes regarding this forum. I didn't see any response on the part of the bloggers. You are saying that it's interesting to you. Why are you postponing writing things like that for later? And the traditional media started with that. Our guest from Pakistan rightly corrected herself. She kept saying, I'm a blogger, but now closer to the end of her intervention, she said, I'm a blogger and a journalist, and journalists are a blogger. Thank you for that. And the final point. You, the authors of the video, from you, I heard a very important idea that you keep trying to transmit and apply to the traditional journalism. You see, you've invited me here. You care about my opinion. Well, my friends taught me, and my senior colleagues, journalists at the university, told me that the purpose of journalism is not about caring for the journalist's opinion. We always talk about consumption of information. Okay, we've consumed something, we've seen some naked buttocks of a beautiful blogger. Okay, what about, well, that's an interesting idea of the blogosphere. What about the good deeds? What can we do after that? What would be the feedback of the society? Buying a new face cream or... No, it's not that. Journalism is not about that. It's not about conveying the information, only conveying the information and taking into account the opinion of a specific journalist. Our task is much wider than that. And I'm hoping, it's not the right verb, I am sure that our point of view, our manner of behaving ourselves, our professionalism and our values will win.
Вот хотелось бы вам задать вопрос. Вот я на самом деле был поражен вашим рассказом о тех массовых нарушениях прав человека и о тех трагедиях, которые происходят в северо-западных провинциях, то есть в зоне войны практически между Афганистаном и Пакистаном. Я, допустим, не журналист официальных СМИ, но я очень хотел бы сделать об этом материал. Я думаю, тоже поехать туда и попытаться сделать материал о детях на войне, о войне в Афганистане и и у меня не будет страховки, потому что я не официальный журналист, но у меня есть добрая воля сделать об этом материал. Как, допустим, вот мой друг Архан Джемаль, при всем при том, что замалчивалась трагедия Рохинджа в Бирме, мусульман, взял на свои деньги, поехал в Бирму и сделал цикл совершенно потрясающих репортажей, ужасных, из лагерей Рохинджа, мусульман, которые подвергались там, на мой взгляд, просто геноциду. Официальные медиа, по крайней мере в России, эту тему не поднимали, потому что была официальная позиция, мы не трогаем китайцев, которые стоят за бирманским правительством. Но
we do not touch the Chinese who are behind the Burman government, but if we have that feeling of pain and empathy with someone's tragedy, then I think that we're obliged to do such things. What would you say to that?
I will repeat myself that I was a journalist and I left journalism because the issues that I felt needed to be covered were not being covered by mainstream. So journalism I've done on mainstream channels, but I choose to support the blogosphere because I feel that certain issues do not sell on mainstream media, and whoever makes the decisions, I've just recently gone through a personal trial where everything that I've witnessed as a journalist, as a social activist, in my personal life, as a single parent, and my personal choices also, I felt it was important for me to write. And I found that despite my position, a lot of people would think that it's very easy for me to get my work published. But I found the same obstacles that somebody who is on the Afghan-Pakistan border has when I pursue those articles. And with my book as well, it took me many months, and still a lot of opposition, a lot of death threats, and a lot of PR companies pulling out because one lobby, the people who are reviewing say it's going to be a bestseller, but the lobby that makes the decisions are very scared to publish it. So if I'm willing to take the risk, and if I'm willing to take death threats, who are these people who say, well, we don't think that we can publish it, if I'm willing to take anything that comes my way? So this is my problem with traditional journalism. And I also want to comment on Sultan. You've made me feel very young because I think Maxime and I both have not turned on the television for 10 years. And we also only watch online, so we must be quite young as well. I think with very busy working journalists, a lot of journalists will say that you don't have the time to watch the 6:30 or the 8 p.m. or the 10 p.m. And it's on demand. Bloggers, or I think the conversation shouldn't really be about bloggers as well, because I think the real challenge is between reading, so written blogs, and video logging, which I think the transition is not. I think it's, I'm sorry, but we'll have to face it, because in 94, there was one blog, and by 99, there were only about 23 blogs. Now I tried to count it in the last hour. I couldn't count it, because there are about over 4,000 blogs in less than 30 seconds, so it's very difficult to keep count of how many blogs per minute. The real discussion should be, we're not reading anymore. And it's true that we have short attention spans, and that should be the real challenge, because absolutely right, that's one of the reasons that I struggled with traditional journalism was because I felt that we were constantly moved. As journalists, we constantly moved from one story to another. And Noreen and I were discussing just before we came up here that it's a bit exasperating because, say, for example, you've got yourself involved in a story about babies with heart disease, and then you're moved to another story. So actually, blogging is going back to traditional journalism, where you can pursue one issue and actually go in detail. So I think you need to change the choice of bloggers. Maybe we can have a chat later on and we can suggest bloggers that go in depth about things. I think we shouldn't be scared of change. If there needs to be a friendly face to journalism, we have to go that way. If we need to make it fast-paced to catch attention, we have to change that. We have to change our running orders to give consumers what they want. And most importantly, we have to talk about, and I give this example wherever I talk, about Brexit, for example, in England, in Britain. A lot of people voted, and we vote wherever we go without really understanding what we're voting for, because not many people read broadsheets anymore. Not many people watch political news. So news has to be given to them which is relevant to them when they're making those decisions. So they understand what they're voting for, they understand who they're voting in, and they understand what their rights are. And I think bloggers, maybe there might be bias, but you have such a huge choice. You can just switch off, which with traditional journalism, it's not always possible.
So, very briefly, you are talking about the project, a project that most likely has been successful investing into blogging, entertainment, and so on and so forth. How about political blogging? Are you ready to invest and to produce that? Because as far as I understand, the cornerstone here is not about entertainment. Entertainment has no issues with it. We're talking about politics. I would like to say that we need to probably make a differentiation between different bloggers. We have entertaining content and we have some social topics as well. As far as what I see in Kazakhstan, yes, we have bloggers, yes, they're influencers. However, the content that they provide is more about entertainment. We have a lot of influence. For instance, you probably know about the new draft law about the Latin alphabet. What was initially proposed was not well accepted by the people, and together with director Saken Juldasov, we produced a small video with a lot of style, with not just about the proposal regarding the Latin alphabet, not just saying that this will not work, but we provided another option, and it went really viral. We had 30,000 shares on Facebook only, and you know, after a while they adopted the law with the Latin script that we offered. At the same time, did we have an influence? Yes. Was it entertaining content? No, most likely not. Then why do young people read the newspapers? Because it's not properly presented for them. So where should they go for it? They go on internet. And yes, in terms of policy, it's the younger people who make decisions, and we need to be targeting them. And we are writing about things of concern to them. In terms of super political things, we will probably go there when we grow older. However, at the moment, we're trying to focus on the issues of concern to our people. Turning to bloggers, I don't see any bloggers here at the moment who would be responsible for the things that they're spreading, disseminating, distributing, and I don't see anyone going to the hotbeds of tension. We only have bloggers who go into entertainment. That's very important because you are talking about the things that are somewhat different to me. Only a very brave person will go to some sort of a problematic war area, most likely with some journalistic background or someone who is super responsible for the society.
I know of Kazakh journalists who worked in conflict areas in Central Asia, in Afghanistan, and without their help, for instance, in Afghanistan, I wouldn't have managed. Please, Big Sultan, you are very successful, truly. 20 million subscribers, 20 million views, that's money, that's revenue. You can make money on advertising. Now, are you tempted to go commercial, to go into success in further raising money through increasing your audience? Is it threatening your halal, your ethical goal as enlightenment, maybe Islamic enlightenment for the Kazakh society? Is it threatening it? It's a hard question. I'm happy I managed to touch some strings with Mr. Osipov. 85, maybe 95% of bloggers in Kazakhstan, I can boldly say that they don't care, if you excuse my wording, about not having the journalistic background or education. They don't care. Yes, they're successful, they make money. In our team, we always strive to strike some balance. In Kazakhstan, we have a social phenomena, vines, short, under 1 minute social themed videos. We actually, Kazakhstan is number 3 when it comes to viewing these short videos. Given that Instagram there are only 70 million of us, and there are Viners who have 3 million subscribers, and these bloggers start businesses. We have a super successful example, blogger Zheka, who also sells ice cream and gyros. He has 27 gyro or doner shawarma outlets. There are many ways of monetizing being a blogger. You don't always have to be paid. You can just be creative, and on that you can do business. And I agree with Zorish. There's mostly recreation, more entertainment. People say there's too much negative stuff going on TV, so let's go but bloggers simply don't think about that. Okay, thank you. Now, questions from the audience. Some people are raising hands. Yes, please, let's start with you. Okay. Hello. Zarina Akhmatova. I'm a journalist. Today also a blogger, because institutionally last 6 months I have been working in conventional media, but I've worked before for 13 years, and I consider myself to be a journalist. I have a short comment and maybe a question. For instance, I'll be living today with knowing that Maxim Shevchenko is an independent blogger. I think it's a headline for Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper. You surprised me. I don't have a single contract with any conventional media. I don't want such contracts. It's my principle. Now, about principal positions. Very often I'm invited to discussions such as journalists versus bloggers. I don't see a contradiction here. For me, blogosphere is a toolbox that helps us in today's world use some additional formats, and as we say with colleagues, when something new emerges, we don't follow it right away, or we may disagree with it. It's actually good for the market, we say, because any limitation is always bad for a market, for any system. When a system stops getting oxygen, it starts deteriorating, in my opinion. Now, you mentioned Yuri Dudz, and all the examples that were used here, in most instances, they actually speak in support of my theory that Dudz is a journalist. In the last 6 years, he's editor-in-chief of sports.ru, and Lin Parfenov is also not a blogger. He simply has no right to show on air in major channels, and when he got his own platform, he started using it, and we all subscribed right away because that voice is important. His journalist style is important for us. Yes, we don't longer see him on TV. He does documentaries, so we just switched on him. Now, about conflict areas, and I'm almost done. 2 years ago I went to Afghanistan, and it was on my own will, and it was very hard for me to organize that trip. Not because I don't have a platform where I could post, but because structurally or infrastructure-wise it was very hard. Being a female journalist, getting a visa from Kazakhstan, that Kazakhstan has good relations with Afghanistan, but it was hard to get that visa. People tell me it's dangerous, say I take that risk. And I couldn't get an insurance company to get an insurance to go there. So my short question for anyone who wants to pick it up, maybe the very dimension of this discussion is somewhat distorted. Maybe we shouldn't talk about controversy of journalists versus bloggers. Maybe we should simply speak of quality of journalism. Now, the means is just secondary, I believe. Thank you. Anyone willing to answer this? Please. Please. I think it's a theme for a separate session, separate panel. What is quality? There are many formats. There's halal, kosher, long, short, internet, radio, pro-government, counter-government, in compliance with the criminal code or not. Code of journalism is quite simple, and it fully matches, or mostly matches, with what Immanuel Kant was saying. You should look at the sky and at what's in your heart. And the very position about which people argue whether everything in blogosphere is a journalism, or do I just sing about things I see? It's quite controversial, because that really actually, as blogosphere says, you can go hype. But on the other hand, it can stay just as one of those unaccounted for millions or billions of blog posts that are trying to survive. Thank you. Rihan, did you have something to say?
Quickly, I think quality is determined by if you have a lot of blogs coming out or lots of journalism. Competition will promote quality, and I think that it is part of the same conversation. I agree that we shouldn't really be talking about. I think it's sorry to upset Alexis, but I think we are beyond the conversation of blogging versus journalism, because I think we've agreed, and I can correct as well, that not all bloggers are entertainment bloggers. Some people are just journalists who have no other means but to blog. So I think the number of blogs that are coming out and the number of journalists turning to blogging, as yourself, as Maxime, and I have seen, and I promote a program across universities in Islamabad and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where we are encouraging journalistic principles in blogging. And the more bloggers there will be, the more journalism we'll have. We will actually get more quality. But again, there still needs to be independent regulatory bodies, because we see a lot of cyberbullying also now increasing because of the blogging, and inter-blogging bullying as well, because the commercial aspect is a huge bonus to bloggers, but also a risk of actually a lot of antagonism. So more work means more quality.
Спасибо. Пожалуйста, Ю.
Thank you, please.
Микрофон включите, пожалуйста.
If you could please turn on your microphone.
My name is Dr. Shahid Qureshi. I'm editor of London Post and professor of media in Chinese University in Hebei. I was listening to the conversation. We don't expect the young bloggers to be wonderful field journalists, because field journalism is a specialized area. As an expert on psychological warfare and fourth and fifth generation psychological warfare, there is something called fear of missing out. And that's why you keep on checking your phone every 30 seconds, because you're going to miss out something. I'm worried about the safety and risk to the bloggers, basically, if they go cross a line and go to the serious type of journalism. I agree with Alexei that the space you are giving to the people to talk about food or entertainment, etc., but they don't know who to vote. They're not politically aware what's going on in the policy, what Nestle companies buying water or waterborne diseases or other problem, polio vaccine, etc. The worst example we have is in the United States. When 9/11 happened, none of the US media, including the CNN, asked this question, that we had 15 intelligence agencies, including the US Air Force. They all failed, and 3,000 people got killed. That is a fundamental question, and none of the US media asked this question. And one more thing which I'm worried about, that in Pakistan you talk about, the USAID has invested millions of dollars in Pakistani media, and that's why they don't talk about drone attacks, they don't talk about how the Afghan war was planted in 35 years ago, 40 years ago, and it's continued as a battleground. And somebody who's coming from that area is very interested in it. So it is a controlled media, and we need to be very careful about giving space to the bloggers. That's fine, but please don't replace it with the serious media, because you don't know what your government is doing. I have not attended a single press conference of a president or a prime minister in number 10 Downing Street where they know the question. They told the journalists what questions to ask, even in 2018. So when you talk about the freedom of speech, yes, good. But personal freedom is also very important. So bloggers we welcome bloggers. Please come and learn about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have 10 minutes now. Да, пожалуйста.
Yes, please.
Я, к сожалению, не знаю, к кому себя отнести. Я и работал много лет в журналистике, и являюсь блогером и финансово-экономическим обозревателем. Я вот хочу обратиться к тем, кто присутствует. К сожалению, впервые мне очень жаль, что я не могу находиться вот на этом диване, потому что, ребята, это та самая часть блогинга, которая в Казахстане называется няшка-блогеры. Это люди, которые не игнорируют вообще в любую социальную повестку дня, так или иначе, и даже упоминание о казахском языке, это было хайповое участие, и влияние, которое оказываются этими людьми на какие-то принятия решений, они, как они считают, слишком завышены. Поэтому я прошу прощения, и вы не упоминаете в этом ролике, хотя вы набрали 2 миллиона просмотров, что в основе этого ролика лежит все-таки трек, который был написан в 2005 году и был очень популярен в Англии, и вы просто его переделали. И нигде, никогда вы об этом не говорили. Это очень плохо, и это очень сильно влияет на тех, кто понимает, что происходит. Что касается журналистики и, так скажем, блогинга, очень важно понимать способность удержать аудиторию. Если человек способен удерживать долгое время, как Максим или кто-то еще аудиторию, все хорошо. Я хотел бы услышать как раз, медиа традиционным удается удерживать аудиторию десятилетиями. Насколько это позволит в короткий срок оценить, можем ли блогеры удерживать точно так же аудиторию и быть достоверными к...
Я могу ответить просто коротко.
Да.
Наше отличие от больших медиа, блогеров, заключается только в одном. Если мне лень удерживать аудиторию, я просто перестану это делать. А большие медиа не могут остановиться, потому что это машина. Прошу вас.
Басел Хаджасим, Сирия. Правда, что в данное время...
Is it true that at these times any person can open up an account in social media and write any information and very quickly distribute it? But that's simply a matter of technology. Development of technology made it possible for one person to write not just information, true information, but anything that they can invent in their head, and millions of people may read that information. It's good when it's a politician or a researcher or a journalist use this technological development. Now about the growth of blogosphere, either it's a threat or progress, I believe it depends only on development of community. When it's high, then it's progress. When it's low, it's a threat. Thank you. Thank you. Please, the last one here. Last question from the audience. If the young man asks it quickly, Alexander Masyatov, editor, обозреватель ТАСС. The question: when you speak of difference of journalism and blogging, one important question arises: anonymity. In my opinion, journalists must assume the responsibility for what they show, for what they write, for what they say. A blogger may actually hide under a nickname. No one may never find out who that person is. So my question is, first of all, to Mr. Desir and everybody else, actually. I think we don't have time for questions. Maybe it's just a comment. Well, we understand your thought because we only had 3 minutes left. Well, that's then the last point. Adopting a law at the government level of mandatory de-anonymization of bloggers, is that a violation of freedom of speech or not? Mr. Desir, it's a question to you as the OSCE representative.
I think it's very dangerous to try to adopt law which will stop anonymizer. I think it's part of freedom of expression, the fact that you can published under a nickname, as you say, it can be also a protection for the individuals. I don't think that the way to ensure the quality of information is to stop the use of anonymizer. First, it's very important to access to information without the authority to know that you are consulting information or website from outside the country, for example, without restriction. And second, it can be in certain states, in certain situations, a protection for those who disseminate information. I think that it's very good, for example, that here in Kazakhstan there is no restriction to the use of any apps, as far as I know. Even if I regret, and that's a part of the discussion I had with the authority, that some website has been blocked because of the use of some article of the criminal code. I think that there should be as least restriction as possible, and that the restriction has to be in conformity with international law, proportionality, necessity. It should be really linked to like call for violence, you know, and risk for the security of other people. But what we hear here, what we have listened in this panel shows that we must leave a lot of space for creativity. Of course, there has to be a distinction between entertainment and information. There is a lot of blogs which are just about entertainment, about humor, about also trying to develop influence through new kind of videos, for example. And those bloggers will not try to refer themselves to professional standards of journalism, because it's not mainly about information. And other bloggers are, in fact, trying to develop the information sphere. And here we must ensure that there is a lot of freedom for the development of this kind of blogs. And of course, there will be a discussion between these bloggers, among the bloggers community. As much bloggers there will be, as much the conversation will be rich and of quality. And there will be a discussion between these bloggers and the professional journalists about the standards of the information, about the respect of a code of ethics. But I think that there will be a place for professional journalists, which will be to do the fact-checking, to give the context, and to ensure the quality of the information.
Факты, факты.
Facts, facts, facts. Shakespeare called it words, words, words. Through Hamlet. We're now closing the session. I apologize, those who are raising your arms. The time is up, and if the organizers would allow it, that's it. Okay. Well, we have to be strict. American moderators, so can't really go further. Now, in the end, I would like to speak of one very important thing. Today, beautiful Zaura celebrates her birthday. She's right here. Let's congratulate this bright, amazing lady and all of us. Let's congratulate her with her birthday. Thank you very much. Success and bon appetit. It's lunchtime.